Call into order the special meeting of the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission. If you will please stand for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
General Administration Function Part 1, 1A, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda. Are there any members of the public?
There are not.
All right. Closing commission communications. Does any commissioner wish to speak during this time?
I would like to say one thing. Anybody who has anything to do with the current I Street Bridge upper deck conversion to a possible pedestrian park bike lane area, it had been said before by this commission, someone had recommended not putting in an elevator of possible things that you could do with the ADA compliant approach to it. And I would like to recommend that again and reiterate that. Don't put in an elevator. Okay, that's it.
All righty. Anybody else? My memory serves me correctly, November 12th or 13th, applications are due to be on commissions in the future, and you must reapply. That
Yes,
sound
I
right?
believe it's the 14th.
14th. Thank you. All right. Number 2, consent agenda. Consideration approval of minutes of the September 10th. Making a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve. Second.
Seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Consideration of Resolution 18-1 establishing the 2019 date, time, and location as reported in Resolution 18-1. Looking for a motion?
Point of clarification, this is the first Monday of every other month, or in the odd months?
Odd
Yeah.
months, yeah.
Correct.
Correct.
January, March, etc.
So moved.
Looking for a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Regular update on pilot on-demand rideshare service. Ms. Strand.
I think that's part of the consent.
For the commission, this is on the consent agenda unless a commissioner specifically wanted to
Oh.
hear a presentation. Typically, we just take one motion on the consent agenda and then approve that.
Thank you for the clarification. Approving the consent as a whole then will, including number 4, motion to accept consent as a whole.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Jason. Regular agenda. Now that makes more sense. Review of the 2012-2018 West Sacramento Safe Routes to School. Now, Ms. Strand. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Happy to be here with you tonight to present a recap on the 2012-2018 Safe Routes to School program that the city's been implementing. And I'm just going to run and grab the clicker. So the Safe Routes to School program is part of a federal grant that was provided to the city in 2011. It was administered by Caltrans, and it has enabled us to contract with nonprofit advocacy group Walk Sacramento, who's here tonight, to represent a lot of the work that they've been doing out in the community at all K-8 public schools on behalf of the city and in partnership with the Washington Unified School District, and with also a lot of support from the local police department as well. I appreciate you guys bearing with us through the technical difficulty.
We do see the PowerPoint on the screen. I don't know if the commissioners see it. There we go.
There we go. All right. So as I mentioned, this is all part of a very large grant that was awarded to the city back in 2011 that kicked off basically a 5-year Safe Routes to School program. We were awarded $496,000 originally with no local match required. This was part of a really broad federal program that was specifically funding Safe Routes to School initiatives. And at that time, we first awarded a contract to Walk Sacramento for about $330,000. As the years went on, we found that there was some additional capacity, and we recontracted with Walk Sacramento more recently in 2017 to continue doing some of this great work out in the community. And then on top of that, we were awarded an additional $50,000 by Caltrans just in this past year to help us meet some additional needs and doing some outreach with some of the K-8s that we had struggled to connect with in the past year or so. So their contract is going to be going through 2018-19, and they're here today to really help give you guys a sense of what types of work they've been out in the community doing and some of the impacts that that's having on the children in the community. So with that, I'm going to invite Molly Wagner from Walk Sacramento up to talk a little bit more about that. All right. That's to advance.
Okay, thanks. Hello, thank you for having us. Just a quick background on Walk Sacramento. We are a nonprofit community-based organization that focuses on building active, safe, and healthy communities. We work with our local health departments and transportation departments to ensure that active transportation policies and benefits are built into the work around the region. One of the ways that we find this most successful is through our schools, or specifically Safe Routes to School. We find that if we can get at the school, which is really the core of our communities, we really start to reach about 80% of the community. So why Safe Routes to School? Our work is based on years of research around looking at students' benefits and getting healthier air quality benefits, as well as exposed to active transportation benefits as a sustainable transportation method, as well as these things are really critical for our children to get to school. A lot of our Safe Routes to School data is focused around the health aspect. We've got a couple stats up on the slides that you can see. Some of our major things are 1/3 of children are overweight or obese. Safe Routes to School helps combat this by getting kids more active on a daily basis. Our family car trips as well make up about 10 to 14% nationally of morning congestion. So again, the less kids we have walking, the more car trips we have. So if we can start to reverse that and get more kids walking and biking, we start to reduce that number of congestion. And then motor vehicle injuries are also the largest source of fatalities for children, whether as passengers, on foot, or bicycle. So looking at our infrastructure, making sure that it is really safe for our children to walk and bike. And then also injuries and fatalities are especially high in low-income neighborhoods. So we want to make sure that active transportation is a viable option for all, because it is also a sustainable and affordable one. Is the left.
You can just roll it down.
Roll it. Oh. All right. The original idea was that if we're able to create safe and accessible walking and biking infrastructure within a mile of the school, we can get about 80% of our community served for Safe Routes to School and alternative modes of transportation. Safe Routes is based on 6 core E's: education, which are programs that teach our students how to walk and bike safely; encouragement, these are programs that incentivize families to choose active transportation modes; Enforcement, programs that work with our law enforcement as well as school crossing guards to ensure safe travel behaviors. Evaluation, these are data collection efforts to collect key data on what prevents students from walking and biking to school or what might encourage them. Engineering, specifically walk audits to understand what physical barriers we have within our communities. And then equity, ensuring that our programs are inclusive of people of all abilities, ages, and income levels. Just some program highlights from our entire program, looking over it. Education, we've developed immersive and hands-on curriculum for students to gain confidence while walking and biking to school and having fun while doing it. This is critical as students age through the school system, and that as they become older, they're more comfortable walking and biking on their own. Encouragement. One of our biggest encouragement programs of Safe Routes to School are our Walk and Bike to School Days. These are community celebratory events where students are rewarded for walking and biking to school. They have also led to the formation of sustainable walking school bus programs at our schools, otherwise known as walking groups. These walking groups are fantastic for students who are either too young to walk on their own or their parents are not able to walk to school with them due to other obligations such as trying to get to work on time. Another benefit of the walking groups is it provides safety in numbers for our students. In addition to our walk and bike to school days, working with our partners at the California Department of Health, the California Department of Health donated 23 bike racks at all of our K-8 elementary schools, as well as River City High School. We've also fitted and distributed over 350 helmets at no cost to our students or families. Expanding from Safe Routes to School in school, we've worked with Sacramento area bicycle advocates to lead family rides around the city. This takes our families out from their regular travel to and from school and then into the communities riding and getting confident riding other places. It also helps build a culture of biking around the city. We have future family rides and bike clubs planned for our middle schoolers through spring of 2019. And then also, I just want to highlight Bridgeway's Be Active program. This program was started in our original 2012 grant. It's a parent-run program dedicated to making students healthy, fit, and clean and green, and is still going very strong today. And looking at other things within the community, we really wanted to make sure that this program is encouraging safe routes and active travel throughout, not just our schools. We launched a pilot wayfinding program in 2018. The signs were the first of its kind to be implemented in the Sacramento region, and it was also partially funded by a SACOG TDM mini grant. The success of the program has led to a permanent wayfinding program led by YSAQMD as a result. Part of the program was to gather feedback from the community members about walking and biking in West Sacramento. Each sign led to a link that provided interactive maps that pointed to suggested walking and biking route destinations. It also gave them an opportunity to provide feedback, and that data was collected for the permanent wayfinding pilot. Engineering. So walk audits are the core of our Safe Routes to School programs. This is where we really start to understand what is preventing students from walking and biking to school. It's a great opportunity to involve our school administrators and stakeholders, including community members that live nearby the school. During these walk audits, we're looking at barriers and opportunities around our schools for improvement. The recommendations that are made out of this walk audit are presented to the city for future improvements. Some of the outcomes of our walk audit include a draft Safe Routes to School appendix developed for the 2018 Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Master Plan. The walk audit of our Westfield Village Elementary School and Sycamore Trail was influential in securing the $5.2 million for the Sycamore Phase 2 overcrossing. And our Safe Routes to School audit helped secure the city's recent upgrade from a bronze to silver level bike-friendly city. So in addition to our walk audits, our schools also get some pretty immediate resources for them to use. They include pick-up and drop-off guidelines at each school that schools can disseminate to our parents to help them understand proper procedures when picking up and dropping off their children, as well as just safety reminders. They also get safe walking and biking maps. These are an excellent tool that parents can use to have a conversation with their students about their walk to school. And then just to sum up some of our major achievements of this program, again, the funding for the infrastructure projects have included the $5.2 million for the Sycamore Phase 2 overcrossing project, the Linden Loop Road Diet, and several crossing safety improvements in our schools. We've also seen a huge shift in culture that embraces safe walking and biking to school as a viable transportation option. The Community Wayfinding Pilot Project was the first in the region. The City of West Sacramento's Silver Level Bike Friendly designation. Safe Routes to School improvements that are prioritized in the city's bicycle, pedestrian, and trails master plan. Sustainable programs such as the Be Active program and walking school buses developed and are growing at all of our schools. And then also Safe Routes to School is one of the only district-wide Safe Routes to School programs in the Sacramento region. And with that, I will pass it back to Sarah. Thank you.
So as you can all see, there's been a lot of great work that's been accomplished over the past 5 years, working closely with Walk Sacramento and the Sacramento Area Bicycle Advocates. So at this point, I kind of want to talk about next steps. Right now, the funding that we have been receiving through the Federal Safe Routes to School Cycle 3 grant program will be expiring for all the work we've been doing with the public K-8 schools at the end of the 2018-19 school year. However, as some of you may have heard, we did recently secure a new grant through the SACOG Traditional Transportation Demand Management, or TDM, program. And that grant is for the amount of $80,000 to go towards an innovative Safe Routes to School program that goes beyond working with K-8s. The federal Safe Routes to School grant program that we previously had received funding from actually restricted us from being able to work outside of public K-8 schools. So with this newly awarded grant from SACOG, we'll be able to branch out and work with private and local charter schools who have in the past not been able to benefit from some of the offerings that come with this type of program, as well as the high school, which is actually highly innovative because there's not much of a very standardized curriculum that's been developed for working with the teenage population. So we're very excited to be moving forward with that. We'll be looking to start developing the plan around that and some of the curriculum during this school year, so that it would be rolled out in the 2019-2020 school year, followed by an assessment that summer, so we can take a look at what are some of the best practices, lessons learned, and then roll it out for a second year. At that point in time, all of the grant funding that we've been utilizing for these programs will be expended, and that would signify the end of our Safe Routes to School program unless we receive direction otherwise from the City Council to explore other resources. The other component that's submitted for your consideration this evening is attachment 1 of your report, and that is the draft appendix to the Bicycle Pedestrian Trails Master Plan. And what's included in that is just a set of advisory recommendations that are compiled through the walk audits that have been conducted by Walk Sacramento. And it's intended to be a companion document to our Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Master Plan and help both staff as well as decision makers in prioritizing funding allocations or helping us to identify and be more competitive for various grant funding sources. So this evening, we invite any questions you may have on that document, any feedback you may have, and ultimately, staff would be respectfully requesting that you make a recommendation to the City Council to adopt that document. So with that, I'll end my presentation.
Questions or comments from the commission?
I have a question and a comment. I know a woman in my Broderick neighborhood, 22-year-old woman. She's involved with a group called Special Team of Role Models, STORM, and she's reported to me that they will go, a small group of them, to schools in the West Sacramento region specifically to try to get them to ride their bicycles home, and they'll lead groups of kids to ride their bicycles home. Are you familiar with Storm? No. She actually then proceeded to tell me that she had contacted the city of West Sacramento asking for some sort of direction in some way to maybe get assistance so that they could get maybe a little more funding or have the resources of West Sacramento to collaborate with you guys. So if you have not heard of them at all, I would recommend possibly reaching out to Special Team of Role Models, and maybe at a later time or something I could get a contact to send her. In fact, maybe I had reached out to Chris Doherty about this, I think. Anyway, so that's a whole separate thing. But I'm on board for putting this into the overall master plan. That's it.
Mr. Peterson?
I'd like the signs, the wayfinding. Those are really nice additions, and the green striping that's going on for bike safety in the city. I did have some questions, though, about the traffic collision table. I guess it's the last page of the staff report. It identifies 6 fatalities and 32 non-fatalities at Westfield Village Elementary, and 5 fatalities, 23 non-fatalities at Westmore Oaks Elementary. And I'm wondering what priority improvements are noted in your program to address some obvious problems around those 2 schools. Those are pretty high numbers relative to the other schools that are on that table. You have a list of high priority project locations to improve pedestrian safety. I'm curious how that correlates with the data that's showing that those 2 schools in particular have had some major problems.
Sure.
So I don't know who can answer that, but.
I'm going to invite Waxack up to speak to the recommendation.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Kieran Kumar. I'm the Executive Director of Walk Sacramento. You'll note that the Westfield Village Elementary School and the Westmore Oaks Elementary School both have high rates of fatal collisions. Those are primarily due to their location along 2 of the city's fastest and highest volume arterial streets. The walk audits don't get too far into some of those streets because we really do look at the circulation around the school specifically. I have to go back with a little bit more of a fine-tooth comb to go exactly through how they're prioritized. But if you go back in the document a little bit further back, there's a prioritization model where schools with more collisions got more priority in terms of their projects. I also know that several of the city's larger projects ongoing, including the overcrossing project and the West Capitol improvements, serve both of those schools. One of the biggest focuses and outcomes, again, is that overcrossing project, knowing that kids are walking up and down, is it Westacre, through the underpass. We have pictures going back to 2012 of kids walking side by side, holding hands through the underpass. So it's been a focus of this project. I have to go back through and see specifically which projects correlate to those 2 schools, but I would say that they have definitely received priority in terms of the high rates of collisions.
Yeah, it's Westfield and Westmore Oaks, not Westacre. So I'm trying to look at this list of projects to see whether any of those are addressing those 2 school locations. I think it's an important connection between the data and the list and the walk audit that you've done to try to connect all those things. And I would appreciate some more detail on when you have those kind of fatalities. And I understand there's road considerations. They're probably higher volume traffic streets that they're adjacent to. But are any of these things addressing, any of these projects addressing increasing the safety for those schools in those locations? That's really my question. And if you don't have an answer tonight, maybe there could be a follow-up explanation.
And I think there should be, there could even be more detail provided in terms of how the projects correlate to some of the data in the appendix there.
Yeah, and I'll just add, there are a number of projects in here. We kind of tried to take away too many school titles to keep the list a little bit more school agnostic so that it didn't seem like one school was being prioritized over another, because there really are important projects across all areas. But some of the examples, Meadow Road, West Acre Underpass, those are all listed in here. So if you just took a look geographically, and that's something we could potentially add in.
Maybe a map,
Yeah.
map that shows the school location and a map that shows the project location. That would be helpful. This is all narrative. Maybe visually, in presentations, maybe to the council, just to make the connections, because it's kind of hard to correlate the projects with the
Absolutely.
data, so.
The other thing I will just mention is you'll notice the dates on some of these vary across the data collection, and that's because we are still currently working with a couple of the schools on updating their 2018 walk audits. So some of those recommendations may actually get updated as we move forward as well. And then I do also want to add that some of the recommendations that have come through the walk audits from Walk Sacramento were actually rolled into some highway safety improvement program applications that we just recently submitted and we'll be hearing back on this winter, that are specifically targeted around some of the schools that you mentioned and improving crossings, safe crossings for those locations.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wetzel?
Question on, especially going back to that last page of stats, is that just from the 2012 to 2018? These are 32 non-fatal and, crashes, traffic collisions near Westfield. What is that time frame?
Sure, so it's the past 5 years.
5 years. Is there any way to, I think, also just break that down to see, is that a consistent piece? Was there something that happened in a certain year that just increased it, bad rain or something like that, so that we could, I think 32 is obvious, all these numbers are very indicative and very telling, but it would be also better for us to understand, are they decreasing, increasing, and all that, if there was a year-by-year kind of breakdown of that.
Absolutely, that's something that we can follow up on, and I will mention the project that I just brought up is part of a broader systemic safety analysis report that we'll be working on and coming to the commission in the future.
Great.
And that's intended to do exactly what you're getting at, which is kind of drill down and understand what factors are contributing to those incidents.
Great, thank you very much.
Other questions? I have a couple questions. Traffic collision chart, I have to agree with Mr. Peterson. If you're going to prioritize, the data definitely shows where you should be prioritizing, and your comment of it's trying to be equal across the board is probably, why wouldn't we just focus and put it in where it's most necessary, would be a suggestion I have. The other one is the data being collected on traffic collisions on school days? If this is a Safe Schools appendix ad, it needs to be on school days only? Okay. It should identify that somewhere. That was maybe a question. I wasn't sure. Are we talking 38 total at Westfield Village within a half a mile of each elementary school always, or just on school days? So some type of, you got a lot of footnotes, maybe add a footnote there so that it's clear. I'm confused on what the Appendix A being put into the master plan would provide. I without the recommendations or the proposals in there, is this just to provide a data point as we continue to grow the master plan? Okay. The staff is seeking a commission recommendation on what to do next if we push this forward and recommend to the council that it's put into it. Sounds like there's some questions on our side. I can be open to some type of conversational piece we would forward off to the council, or maybe word it in such a way as it needs to be. I mean, we have old data, you're going to update the data. Taking into the commissioner's comments of relativity to accidents and prioritization be applied in an important feature. If you're going to go through this and it be a safe route to school, why would you not fund it to hit where you have the most unsafe routes? And then maybe highlighting a couple of those little nuances of updating your data and maybe some added footnotes. Does anybody want to add any of those comments to those comments? Make a motion to send it forward?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to to approve the staff recommendation to forward the amendments to the plan. With the comments you noted, again, my comment was more directed at relating the project high priority list to the fatalities and the schools most in need, and with some visualization, some kind of a map that ties those two things together as part of the approval of the report on the council.
A second?
I'll second that.
Second and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Number 6, consideration of the micro-mobility regulatory framework. Mr. Doherty.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. Chris Doherty, Senior Analyst with the Public Works Department. The item before you this evening is a workshop on the micro-mobility regulatory framework. Micro-mobility refers to shared mobility devices such as bike share or coming soon e-scooter share. These are not intended to regulate privately operated devices if you owned your own personal scooter or bike, or vehicles, automobile vehicles, excuse me. These services are gaining popularity across many cities across the country. And while they can offer a new choice in mobility throughout the city, due to the speed and with the disruptive nature that they are being deployed, cities are having to react very quickly to their insertion into the mobility landscape. And they have caused some negative impacts with their deployment. Those impacts generally operate around sidewalk riding is one issue, and just general parking, leaving them being left on the sidewalk. They can obstruct ADA access and whatnot. So to mitigate this access, the city is moving forward with a regulatory framework and an ordinance going to council that will address some of these issues and will establish the authority for the city to regulate these new mobility devices moving forward. And our intent here is to draft the definition for these devices vague enough to where any new shared mobility devices that come on the scene in the future that we cannot contemplate at this time will be brought under this ordinance as well. So staff did pretty extensive research across the various cities in the country to determine how other cities are handling and addressing these issues. And also the National Association for City Transportation Officials, NACTO, released a series of guidelines for how to deploy these in cities. So we use those tools and those best practices to come up, to kind of focus on 5 issue areas for our ordinance moving forward. The first is device parking. And this has been probably one of the more divisive issues around this topic. So our recommendation is to provide device-sensitive or context-sensitive parking for each type of device. I'll use the example of, you've probably seen throughout town, the jump bike hubs that have been placed either in the street taking up a parking spot or in the sidewalk clutter zone with racks for those. If we were to deploy e-scooters into the city, they do not have a device to lock to something. They just lock their wheel. So that might not be the most appropriate place for these, but it might be an okay place for these. Some other cities have painted an area in the clutter zone to kind of help instruct users of appropriate places to leave these so they don't fall down the sidewalk and cause tripping hazards. So we're happy to hear some feedback from the commission on maybe how we want to park these moving forward in the future. We're also focusing on user education. Generally with these devices, that is a smartphone application that is used to unlock the device and access it. We are going to be requiring that there is some level of user education between the service provider and the user, so they know not to to ride on the sidewalk or to use it on the sidewalk, and to park them appropriately. They meet the minimum standards like the state regulations. For example, scooters require a driver's license to operate. And also, for example, jump bikes has a minimum age of 18 years of age to operate, that they understand those and that they're using them accordingly. So we will require that level of education for new users. Also, shared mobility services often focus on areas that just focus on the highest ridership, and those areas can be largely affluent neighborhoods throughout the communities, while ignoring other low-income areas. So we will also require that an equity plan be submitted with a permit that the city staff would approve. That equity plan could focus on topics like ensuring there's enough devices in lower income areas so that people have access to them, that there's specific marketing techniques for those areas, so they're not using a standard marketing approach for everybody, so that they're tailoring it to the different communities around the region. And they could have maybe more affordable pricing structures, much like JUMP has the Boost program for our equity areas throughout the city and throughout the entire region. Data sharing is also important. These new shared services rely heavily on technology to operate their devices, and the city relies heavily on data to make our data-driven decision-making for our planning purposes. We would require that there's a shared agreement with that data with the city from the provider, so that we could use that data amongst other data that we collect to make better choices for planning around the city. But it is important to note that we would want that data anonymized so that we don't get into privacy issues as the holder of the data through the city. And then finally, the fee structure. To manage these services and devices would require some level of staff time. And to recoup that time, we would charge a fee, probably an initiation fee and maybe an annual fee that would be solely driven on cost recovery. The goal here is to keep the fee as low as possible. I know in the staff report I'd indicated a couple examples from around the region. Those are a little higher than I think we would definitely want to target. I don't think we would have that kind of load. But we do want to make sure that we are not burdening the city with these new devices that are coming in to make a profit in our city by burning our staff time. So we'd like to recover some of our staff time in there. So with the feedback we received this evening, we will draft ordinance language around these topic areas or any new ones that become apparent tonight. And we would like to take that ordinance to the city council in December, probably with adoption in January. So at this point, we would ask the commission to give some feedback on the framework that we've shown you this evening, and to take an action to proceed this framework to council in ordinance form later on this year. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from the commission? Mr. Johnson?
So I have a question. It's in regards to the scooters. Are there a size requirement? How large are these scooters going to be? Because I'm kind of a little bit familiar with the licensing requirements for scooters and stuff, but I thought that if it was below a certain CC, there was no license required.
So these are not mopeds that you're familiar with. Those have a California vehicle registration structure and framework that governs those. These are, if you could imagine, slightly larger than your standard Razor scooter that is powered by an electric battery and motor, and it is unlocked with a smartphone. So these are a very small, truly micro-mobility element. And earlier this year, I believe in March, we had started negotiations on a contract with Lime Scooters, which I think we had brought a scooter here for the evening to demonstrate how they work. We are still talking to them to deploy that service. It has not been rolled out yet. So, but it's not, I think, a true moped, which I believe you're talking about.
Okay.
Mr. Wetzel?
I have a couple questions. First is on the user education. I've noticed, I've seen a lot of comments about jump bikes and in general about some of that micro-mobility piece about safety and helmets. Is there a way to include some of that encouragement of helmet use in some of those user education pieces. I know that under 18, you have to wear a helmet, and they do not apply to jump bikes because they are not supposed to be ridden by under 18-year-olds. But outside of that, those things are going pretty good, pretty fast, and riding on city streets with a lot of automotive folks in their wake. So is there any opportunity to place some safety pieces on there?
Sure. Earlier this summer, the city public works staff, in conjunction with the police department staff and the Sacramento area bicycle advocates, initiated a series of training courses. We did 8 of those courses throughout the summer. That we did helmet giveaways through that process. There was a small amount of curriculum kind of focused on jump bikes and how to use them. Since then, Jump has come back to us saying, we would like to help you support some of those classes so that we can use that to get out to the users. And through that, they have given helmet discounts, plus we have actually helmets to give away as well. So if users are wanting to take those classes and learn more, they can get a free helmet. And they are offering a full hour of additional time on the bike for free to taking the class. So they're trying to incentivize people to go to the class as well.
Thank you. Another piece that I was looking at is especially some high-use businesses or regions. I know that I applaud Southport Town Center. You've added a larger hub for jump bikes there. But I've noticed, I've seen around, especially the port area and the breweries in that area, they get locked up on any kind of sign anywhere, and it seems like that is a popular place to go. So is there a place or a recommendation that you can put in to maybe put, mini hubs where like 3 or 4, you don't have to do the 20. I've seen those 20 stands, but maybe 3 or 4 so people can, if they're going to that type of facility, can just place them into some of those high areas.
Sure. When we did our hub planning for the current jump system, when we rolled it out, we made a lot of assumptions because it was a very new concept to the Sacramento region. We now know with ridership data and parking data really where people are going. I think we've already eclipsed 250,000 rides since we started the program with Jump. Some of the highest ridership in the country per bike and per person, honestly. So now we have a better idea. We have the data, again, back to the data sharing structure, to know where we can put in that infrastructure, that bike parking infrastructure for Jump, or when we get new elements in, we have a better idea now where to put the parking for those. So we're working with Jump right now to do things like that.
So there's a way, an infrastructure within the city to kind of understand. And the other thing is, can it be movable? So, something falls out of favor, can I don't want us to put in a whole bunch of like permanent things that later on, say YOLO Brewery leaves, that we have this jump bike station and no use for it. Can it be moved? Or is there a way for you to kind of do that type of thing?
The non-charging hubs, which is all we have in the city right now, charging hubs are coming soon, are simply just drilled and bolted down to concrete. So they're very easy to unbolt and move away.
Great. And then the third is just working with the various micro carriers to replenish some of those areas. I've seen, again, going back to those non-charging hubs recently, that there are, a slew of places to park bikes and no bikes there. And it's like 20 of them. So, but they're in a high traffic area where I would think that people would be interested in using them because that's where the hub is. And if you're looking to get a bike, you're kind of thinking in your head, okay, I'm going to just walk down the street, even though the app has where the bikes are. Is there any way to kind of guarantee some of those bigger hubs to have some of those bikes available?
Yeah, I work fairly closely with the Jump staff to make sure that, especially around the areas that we know are going to be really high impact, that they're loaded up with bikes especially around the Civic Center and the Transit Center. I want to make sure that we have a good amount of bikes here so that people can come in on the bus and use them, because we see a lot of that transit to jump bike
Right.
interaction. We also see right around the 3rd and Tower Bridge Gateway, a lot of jump bike interaction with VIA.
Right.
So people, and then taking a jump bike downtown. So we see a lot of movement back and forth there with the bikes. So we work pretty closely, and we look at the data analytics and make sure that we know kind of where to stock up the bikes in certain areas. Because right now we are at the full rollout of 900 bikes throughout the region. And right now they're actually, since it's been so successful, they're looking to actually deploy more. So there may be more of these and more an opportunity to have more mobility throughout the area.
Great, thank you very much.
Other questions? How many FTEs are currently assigned to micro-mobility? Just you?
Yes.
Are you funded via the pilot or just,
Right now, I am effectively tracking my time through since May so that we can do that some analysis, but it is, I would say, probably occupying maybe 10 to 15% of my time.
okay. Looking at your fee structure, obviously reimbursing the city for its time. One of the things that it lists is staff time, parking revenue loss, monitoring and permit processing. Any consideration for adding into the street and or sidewalk maintenance fund or something to that effect, where maybe 1%, something? I'm just thinking, looking at it, you're accounting for your time and the city's loss of parking, but what about the use of our transportation system, the roads, the sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera? Just some type of, I pay a gas tax, is there a bike tax?
We can definitely look into that. We do expect probably multiple operators. One point of clarification, City of Sacramento is looking, they're doing a similar ordinance right now, and that gets passed. Scooter companies are kind of waiting to come in. We anticipate they'll also come over here as well, so that we'll have multiple operators in this space and probably maybe even multiple bike share operators in this space. So we will structure that fee so that it's probably more of a per device. And then we can include something about just operation of the public right-of-way and maintenance costs to that. Although I will add, bike and light-duty vehicles like that have a very, very minimal impact on the roadway when it comes to, the major impact is heavy vehicles.
Well, right, I mean, and that's what I do for a living, so I'm familiar with the impact. But if we're gonna account for everything, then
Sure.
account for everything, and that's right, even if it's minor. Who currently is paying for those bike hubs? Do they pay for it and install it themselves?
So
Do they-
5 years ago, SACOG, the Sacramento Council of Governments, and the Air District in Sacramento secured a grant to bring a bike share system to Sacramento region. That went through a kind of a long process on a couple different models. When Jump came back to us with a more of a privatized model, they deferred some of the money towards that, putting in the hub locations. So that's what's been funding the dollars that have been buying the hubs and putting them in the ground. The city at this point, besides my staff time, has not had really any capital outlay for any of these services.
Do we, or would we consider some type of lease of that land? If we're using a chunk of the street, is there a lease to use that line, like a joint use agreement concept?
Yeah, what we've been using is an encroachment agreement structure right now with Jump, and we would anticipate, we really need to see how many operators come in. If it's dedicated space for an operator, that's one thing. But if it's a multi-operator system, then I'm not sure a lease is the best framework to use.
A ride share, kind of like everybody parks in this parking lot, but anybody can, it's kind of like the meeting gathering spot of all those shared vans as they head out to the bay. So that would be more of a city service, not so much a Jump service, right?
That could be folded into a per unit device, like permit fee calculation pretty easily for parking, depending on how, again, we're operating a little bit of an unknown territory at this point, so.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate your time. Needing anything from us? I guess I should look.
Yeah, we are seeking an action to take this framework in ordinance form to the city council.
Motion to move the framework forward.
I move to move the framework forward.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? Number 7, presentation and discussion on the Sycamore Trail Phase 2 and 3 project, aesthetic treatments public workshop. Mr. K?
There we go. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, good evening, Vice Chair Ralston and Commissioners. My name is Min K, Supervising Engineer with the Public Works Department. I'm here tonight to present to you the Sycamore Trail Phase 2 and 3 project aesthetics, mainly the bridge or pedestrian overcrossing aesthetics. With me tonight is most of the project team. We have project engineer Brian Hansen, our consultant design project manager Dennis Haglin, as well as our landscape architect Dan Miller. Now, as noted in your staff report, the Sycamore Trail is a very important element of city's bicycle pedestrian trails master plan. The project design of Phase 2 and 3, which goes from Joey Lopes Park to Westmore Oaks K-8 Elementary School, was kicked off approximately 14 months ago. Just a little bit of information that the project team obtained from the school district. More than half of the students actually live north of US 50 that attend Westmore Oaks. So that speaks to the importance of this project. Again, the project kicked off about 14 months ago with a $1.1 million federal grant through SACOG. City then pursued and received a $5.2 million grant for construction from the state via the California Urban Greening Program grant for construction. Unfortunately, the project is not completely funded for construction, so the city actually applied for a $1.25 million active transportation program grant through SACOG again for construction of Phase 3, which is the trail south of Westmore Oaks. The project overall schedule following tonight's project aesthetics feedback. We intend to go to City Council on December 5th for more direction. To finish the engineering plans and specifications, hopefully by the end of this year. And then there's still quite a few hurdles for the project team to get through as far as utility coordination and right-of-way. And we hope to complete that in May of 2019. And then hope to begin construction in about October and then complete construction in 2020. Okay, the next slide I have here is a little bit of the project scope, but I'll just go over the highlighted areas. The blue highlighted area.
I was just going to ask a question. You skipped a slide.
Sure.
I was trying to get context for the location of this, so this map was better for me. I don't know.
Oh, okay, sure. Sorry, I totally forgot about the slides.
Yeah, okay.
That's inshallah. Yeah. Again, I'll give you a moment to take a look at this. Yeah, Phase 2 is basically from Joey Lopes Park, heading across the freeway and landing at Westmore Oaks.
Okay.
And then there's a little sidewalk connection out to the local street. Because the programming for Westmore Oaks and future potential park programming has not been decided yet, there will not be a trail continuing through the school. We will complete design of Phase 3, basically enhancing the existing trail to the south of the school. And if we're funded from the ATP grant, we'll construct those improvements. Most of the improvements will involve lighting and security type enhancements. So this kind of wraps up this particular project. Again, the blue is south of the school. North is to your left here. The red highlighted area is the transition area from Joey Lopes Park onto the bridge. And then, of course, the highlighted yellow area is the pedestrian overcrossing or the bridge. Okay. Now, before I turn the presentation over to our landscape architect, Dan Miller, we are suggesting that we go through a two-step process to narrow down the preferred alternative for tonight. Dan Miller is going to go over the project details as far as aesthetics, and then we ask that you save all your questions until he's done, and then we'll do our best to respond to the questions before you vote on the preferred alternative. With that, Mr. Dan Miller from Calendar Associates.
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you. Again, I'm Dan Miller with Calendar Associates, a landscape architect. We're working with Drake Hagelin and the city on the trail design and aesthetics for the overcrossing. To give kind of an overview, this project, as you all know, is a really big opportunity first to kind of put another segment of the connection, the pedestrian and bike connection of the city system. But it's also, from the overcrossing standpoint, an opportunity to create an entry gateway feature coming through 50 into the city. So there's a kind of a dual opportunity there. From a aesthetic vision standpoint, there's two major goals that we're looking for: is a consistency along the trail with the existing Joey Lopes Park, which is at the north end, but the greater trail system starting with the Phase 1 Sycamore Trail. So we looked at a lot of the elements and the materiality and the treatments of both Joey Lopes Park and what is being done in Phase 1. And because the segments of the trail are separated in some portion, we want to make sure that visitors that are using the trail can see elements that are consistent through all of them, so you can recognize the entry points to the trail. And then, and so that's the cohesion with the southern segment trail. Oops. And sorry. And so some of the elements that we're looking at is the bench treatment at Joey Lopes Park, the gabion bench treatment, park features such as picnic tables and the trash receptacles, just a consistency in those materials there, including opportunities for public art and interpretive signage, and the use of pavement enhancements at the trailhead areas to kind of have some visual connection throughout the trail system, these segments of the trail system. And then trail-wide lighting, both aesthetics and obviously creating a safe trail environment. A multi-use trail, so this will be bikes and pedestrians along the way. And we'll get into some of the details along the southern segment where there are opportunities where we can separate pedestrians from bicycle. Some of the corridor, the narrowness of the corridor require them to be directly adjacent to each other or shared, and we can show you that. Identifying locations where we could do some more formal planting, again, at these trailhead areas to have a little, rather than kind of just native planting that's non-irrigated, there are opportunities to do some more formal planting to highlight these entry points and trailhead areas. So at the Northern Trail segment, again, Joey Lopez Park, which is on the north, is on your right of the screen here. This is where you would enter coming across the crosswalk. And there's a opportunity for a little bit of landscaping area and a paved trail attachment, concrete paved trail entry area. Before coming around and starting up the overcrossing, there's a ramp that leads up to the overcrossing, pretty much at the very left-hand side of the screen that you could see that starting. There is some opportunity for a potential future artwork or art point at the curvature area on this segment. I'm jumping kind of now because it's a similar treatment at the Southern Trail segment. So this is south of Westmore Oaks Elementary School. After you go through the neighborhood sidewalk, this is another trailhead entry where we have a paved and formal planting entry point before you get onto the trail segment itself. There are opportunities for some of the bench seating, trash and litter receptacle on that north end. And then the Southern Trail segment itself, this is what I was describing previously. There's in the wider areas, we're looking at separating the pedestrian decomposed granite walking path from the multi-use trail, which would then predominantly be the bicyclists using it. And the areas where they are, where the corridor gets narrower, they would be directly adjacent to each other or connected. There would be opportunities for some picnic tables along that segment and some bench seating just as stopping points. I can wait to the end for any questions, but if you did have questions along the way, please feel free to ask, or we can gather them at the end. This is, I think, the main point we wanted to kind of get input from the commission on is the overcrossing itself. There are a number of options that, as a team and with the city, we've developed that we're looking for input on from the commission. The aesthetic vision for the overcrossing, again, it's an opportunity for a focal point for the project and for the city as you approach the city across 50, but also as a focal point for people who are using the trail as a identifying point along that trail system. We looked at 4 different aesthetic treatments, kind of theming to the aesthetic treatment, and those aesthetic treatments would be carried through some of those special pavement areas and treatments along the trail. So some of the themes we're going to talk about can be translated into pavement treatments as well. So there's some consistency with that. And all these concepts we've tried to pull from reflecting on West Sacramento's either geographical, its industrial history, or its cultural history with the Patwin Indian tribe connection. So we've named them, just for ease of talking about them, as the river, the port, the basket, and the weave. And I'll just go through each one. So the first is the river, and what you have is at the bottom of each of these will be the elevation as you're coming on 50, going eastbound. But again, reflecting on the connection of the city to the river, to the Sacramento River, pulling from the wave pattern in the railing forms and in the treatment of the columns beneath. We do reflect on here up in the upper left-hand corner. I'll make note that we had a hope or vision or a thought of doing some kinetic art treatment, which in the elevation is kind of the green or the gray stippled that goes underneath the waveform. That would be wind. As the wind goes through, it would make those metal pieces move.
while we've been working with Caltrans all along, kind of more recently going into more detail of this, that kinetic art is not something that we would be able to accomplish within the right-of-way of Caltrans. So we would be looking at something more like the lower middle image, doing some other treatment that was not a movable type of treatment on the railing and fence system, but still hopefully emphasizing that wave and water feel. The second option that we're looking at was looking to the industrial history and the industrial presence of West Sacramento, specifically the port area, and pulling the forms of the railing and bridge system from the architecture at the port. So one of the inspirational images in the upper right-hand corner, translating that into the architecture of the railing system on the bridge itself. Also, you can see on the elevation view, there's a split screen. We tried to convey some potential treatment of using lighting effects that would wash over the screen of the railing system, so that that blue glow is kind of an intentional effect. Lighting is something that can be applied to any of these concepts that we're doing. Again, we'd be working with Caltrans and the dark sky ordinance to make sure that the type of lighting is appropriate. It would be serving for security and safety for people on the bridge, but it could also be an added effect to the bridge aesthetics itself. In the upper left-hand corner, we did a cross-section through this bridge, and this is just an example. We wanted to deal with or address both the aesthetics of people traveling on the road and looking at the bridge, but also the experience of being on the bridge. And that upper left-hand cross-section shows us some treatment of the railing and guardrail where we bend it out to give a little more of a spatially a little more room for people who are perception of the room of the people traveling on the bridge itself, so that instead of just the straight vertical typical railings, bending them out a little bit more to make the bridge feel a little more open. The third option, again, starts to tie back to the Patwin Native American history of the area, and building upon a basket weave kind of unique form to the bridge. And again, this addresses, I feel, addresses both a unique vision for vehicular travelers, but through the form of the railings itself and the shadow and light effect of the pedestrian experience as well. So the rail and the sense of enclosure and opening that enclosure as you travel across the bridge itself, with the form inspired by the basket weave. And a little more abstract interpretation of those elements through a helixal structure with a more deconstructed basket to create the light and the shadow effect and the sense of open and enclosure as you're traveling across the bridge itself. That was the intent of the 4A weave. And then carrying it one more level is going more abstract. This is just an interlaced helix, again, inspired by the basket weave, but kind of taking it to another level, something that's really would be totally unique to the West Sacramento area. We think something that would be, people would talk about it. So it's a functional in connecting, but it would also be a statement piece for the city. Again, on all these, the treatment of the railings. We've spoken a lot about the railings and how those elements would increase interface. Lighting is could be an integral part of any of these concepts, both, again, from a safety, but also an aesthetic standpoint. And screening, particularly in areas where the approach to the overcrossing is adjacent to the residential areas, the fencing can be treated in a way that can screen people from not looking down into the neighboring properties. We'll come, I assume, should we just continue on and then come back to the voting on? Okay. So just to kind of bring full circle of all the components of the project itself, this is a rendering of the proposed plan view on the Westmore Oaks landing side. And again, it's the concept here is to extend the trail treatment, so the elements, the field, the materials that are carried through over the overcrossing would be brought through on this landing. Most of the, coming from the top down to the right and back to the left is mostly the full extent of the ramp that comes down from the overcrossing. And then it lands at a large plaza area that we've reflected something that might be more connected to the wave concept of the overcrossing, with a water pavement treatment and a compass that connects to the nautical feel of that. But that can be adjusted based on the overcrossing concept that's preferred. Also acknowledging that we're touching down at the school side, there are opportunities to make a connection with the school in the treatment of that approach. Attaching school banners to the light posts that come on the landing, incorporating part of the ramp that goes up will be MSE wall treated to retain, and that wall can be embossed with patterns and such. And one idea is putting the dragon code of honor, the school's code of honor, into that, so it'd be an artistic element that could be incorporated in, so it isn't just a blank wall. That's a retaining wall. There's an art opportunity there. So I think with that, maybe questions first, and then I think the hope is to come down with 2 recommendations.
I'd like to jump in, Jason McCoy here. Before we get too far into it, I want to remind the commission what staff is asking of you. So staff is asking for you to provide questions and comments to the staff, ask questions, discuss it amongst each other, and come up with 2 recommended alternatives, and then deliberate a little bit more and come up with 1 final consensus to forward to the city council. This is not an easy feat, and it's going to require probably some discussion amongst yourselves as well as questions of staff.
You guys done?
I think so.
Questions from the commissioners?
I had a question actually about one of the other slides, not so much the design, but of the bridge. But you had a layout that showed several bollards within the approach. I don't know, I think it was the north end. I was a little concerned about that. Okay, this one, I think this slide showed it. You're kind of you're going around a turn, and you've got 2 removable bollards. My concern is more safety. If somebody is speeding around that corner and you got a bollard in the middle there, they could hit it, and I have some personal knowledge of people that have been seriously injured on bikes running into bollards, and there's a lot of discussion about whether bollards are good or bad. Sometimes I don't even understand why you have them, but
Keep cars out.
They keep cars out, okay. So having said that, I just have a little bit of a concern about the location of this bollards relative to that turn and safety for the bicyclists. So I don't know how you address that, but.
There is a possibility we could use some, what they call softer bollards that could take a couple hundred hits that would still bounce back.
Oh, okay. These are not metal, you
Right,
know,
right.
rigid.
No, they would be rubber.
Okay, yeah.
That's still something we can address in design, so that's a good comment, thank you.
Yeah, that was my comment on that. But as far as the designs, I'm getting the feeling, I mean, I've been to Palm Springs, you've seen signage there where you're kind of being introduced to the city with the sign on top of the overcrossing. And so it's kind of cool that we're doing something like that here. I noticed the last option, you didn't have the name on it, so you didn't have West Sacramento on it. I kind of like that, I guess, just from a kind of an artsy standpoint, the weave, but it doesn't have the name of the city on it, so I would add that. Although I don't know if I feel strongly about any of these options. We are a port city, it would be nice to have something, I guess, related to our history. I don't think of us so much as an Indian historical area, but I guess we have a lot of Indian historical features here. So I like the we personally in terms of the look of it, but I do think we should have the name of the city on that as well. So that's just a thought about, the designs that they're showing us.
Other comments, questions about the report from the commissioners? You guys are budgeted to build this. You guys have all the money in place except for phase 3 you're still waiting for, which is the school side of, which part is phase 3 and which, is the bridge 2, phase 2 or phase 3? One saying yes, one saying no.
The bridge is phase 2. Phase 3 is south of the school.
Okay.
Sorry. Are there large differences in the price of the different bridge? Yeah.
Ryan's going to answer that.
Oh.
Hi, Brian Hansen. Yeah, just to be clear, the funding that we have is, the funding we have currently secured is for a simpler structure with a simpler fencing option. What we're looking at here in terms of the weave and those, there's significant additional cost to that, right? Just, you can see just by the pure size of it and the magnitude of it. So just to give you a sense of some ballpark costs, when we look at relative to just the baseline cost, the first option, the river, is obviously the most affordable. And in that case, adding architectural elements and things like that is maybe a couple of $100,000. When we get to something like the weave, those are the 4A and 4B, now we're talking more than $1 million of additional funding that we would have to find in order to build something like that. So, yeah, we've got some ballpark costs, but they escalate from about 200,000 to, over $1 million.
Yep. Looks pretty cool, though.
Any other questions or comments before we start talking about the option?
The only other question I had, I mean, I kind of like the port also, but I wasn't real excited about this concept, which you're showing here. I was having a hard time relating the design of the crossing to a port or industrial theme. So the port is kind of it's a weird industrial city, so I like that, but I'm not sure this captures it so well. But that's just my other thought, I guess, 2 and 4.
I hate the port.
Wow.
All right.
Not going to have agreement on that.
If we'll go down from my right to my left, if you'll state your favorite option, we'll go from there.
I like the weave personally, but in general, I would just say
Which weave, A or
4A.
B? 4A.
Yeah. In general, I would just say, I guess if you were to ask me what my end all be all kind of recommendation or suggestion would be, is just kind of keep the theme in keeping with the direction in which the city is heading, right? Which is to say, this is a progressive, I don't mean that in a political way, so nobody here take offense to that. I just mean it's a forward-thinking, dynamic kind of city, that's on the front foot, that's a trend-setting city. It's emerging, it's growing, that sort of thing. So if you could encapsulate all of that into a bridge, that's what I would say. Just so it matches, right? And I would say also, not ordinary. Let's not make it an ordinary-looking bridge. Let's make it something different. Let's make it a marker for the region, something recognizable. The way the I Street Bridge is, or I'm sorry, the Capitol, the Tower Bridge, right? Same thing. Like, people recognize it. Well, let's make, this one the same way, except this is, new West Sacramento, or the newest phase of West Sacramento. So those are my thoughts.
Mr. Peterson?
I guess 4A, the weave with the addition of West Sacramento.
Mr. Wetzel?
I actually prefer the river one. I think with our burgeoning waterfront and a lot of things that are happening on the riverfront, that to introduce people as they come down 50 to West Sacramento as a kind of a river city, I think is a good opportunity for us to just really brand the city in that way. I do like, I understand why the Caltrans would say no on the metallic stuff, but I do like the idea of having something that really signifies and looks like a river instead of rolling hills. I may just not see it in that one elevation there, but if it can look like a river, it'd be great. And I do agree that this West Sacramento, whatever it is, the name of the city should be plastered onto the bridge itself to announce that West Sacramento is here, rather than you're just on the west side of Sacramento.
Mr. Johnson?
I like them all. They're all very.
You gotta pick one, that's the rules.
Okay, pick one. All right, so they're all very well thought out, but I'm going with the basket.
You can start with two and then narrow to one.
No, I'm going with the basket. I like the west over the Sacramento. It's a lot easier to read. Driving down the freeway, you start reading all the way across, you might get in an accident, but that right there sticks out. West Sacramento. So I'm going with the 3, basket.
Mr. Hankinson?
Hawkinson.
Hawkinson, my apologies.
It's okay, thank you, sir. I will go with the weave, the second one. That's my vote. My question would be related to Mr. Johnson's comment just now. Can you put West Sacramento on this second weave or any of these in the configuration of letters that he was just talking about?
The helix ones are a little more challenging. It was intentional to leave them off, but that's something we definitely can study. That just,
I actually am fine in my vote to not have the lettering on there, because it's still, if it looks great, that's what matters. If it looks awesome.
the only challenge is because of the curvature that it has is how it would happen. But it's noted, thank you.
Well, I'm going to go more conservative. I like the port. I like the blue light up at night, at least to the picture. I also believe it's just a bicycle bridge, so I'd rather keep, a little bit on the conservative side on the finances, as you've kind of earmarked a certain amount of money for this project. Probably should stick within that for your greater line of success, not knowing where construction costs are changing exponentially by month right now, and I just couldn't see us just keep putting money down because it will look prettier. It should it should be functional. I do agree with everybody except for maybe Mr. Hawkinson at the end that it needs to say West Sacramento. It's the first thing you see when you're driving in off the causeway off of Davis. So you're coming in from the bay. Well, let's go first. So let's show it off a little bit. But whatever we screw up on this one, we can add to the new I Street Bridge, C Street Bridge, whoever we're calling that, and they can make that one prettier. But that being said, the weave 4A seems to be prevailing. So at this point, between
Actually, I'd like to change my vote to the port as well.
Perfect. Now we have something to talk about.
I like that coloring too as well.
All right, so now we have something, we were supposed to go to 2, now we're at 2, 4A and option number 2, so we'll do the same thing.
I'd like to jump in and just remind that we can put lighting on any of the options. Sorry, go ahead.
I believe that to make sure that everything is being heard, lighting's kind of happening, period, right? You're not going to go over a dark bridge.
Yeah, no, I think what lighting has to be on for security purposes,
Right.
but it's the effect lighting can be applied to any of these concepts. So that wash that we show here in the port, that type of effect could be applied to any of the.
Yeah, there's over Interstate 10 in LA on the East County side, there is a bridge very similar to this. It has a dynamic blue tint to it that driving to Arizona, I've passed several times. It's very nice to see. It's very simple. I get nervous just being in facilities for a large public entity. That's a lot to maintain. Long-term, painting-wise, thinking of the safety of it or what the creatures of creatures that like bad habits, I guess we want to be careful, and what those big rings and so forth over the bridgeway can be used for or thought of, or climbing, or you're attaching yourself to a school. So there'll be obviously, Mr. Peterson's comments earlier in the day were about West Acre and underneath that area. This kind of helps alleviate up and over that. So you're going to have a large student population using it. Keep it simple, make it functional. That's my 2 cents on the weave part. That's a lot of stuff there. Nice, yes, of course, especially with what Mr. Brown has given us for West Sac on our heritage side of our community. It's a lot more to maintain and a lot more maintenance and deferred maintenance, which is neglected in the public agency world. It just could quickly show its age. So number 2 and 4A, we're going to go right to left again. Do you stick with 4A?
4A, all the way.
Mr. Peterson.
I like 4A, but because you can't add the name of the city on it, because of all the confusion with the design, and I'm okay with the port also. So that would be my second choice. I'm okay with that if that's.
Is it, well, for 4A, there are some spaces in between that, the helix curves. Can you add some letters in there?
Yeah, I'm not going to say that we can't do letters on there, so I would maybe request that if that's.
It seems to be important to us.
Yeah, we could work with that and letters.
Any recommendation should say West Sac. I mean, again, I think we all agree that especially coming from the Bay Side, it's a good welcoming sign. If anything, those that don't really know the difference between Sacramento and West Sac, the first thing you're going to say is, I'm in West Sac. Oh, all right, I appreciate that. I'm sticking with number 2 myself. Mr. Wetzel.
I will, since my river got lost in the
You
round,
lost it,
the first
sorry.
round, I'll go to the port as well.
Mr. Johnson.
I'm going to stick with 2 as well. I like to see that West Sacramento. I want to know that I'm coming home.
Mr. Hawkinson.
No, I'm going with the wave.
Okay, so that's 4A. So I'm sorry to some, but number 2 has won. Congratulations.
I
to
would
all
only
the time.
add, though, that, again, I don't see this as particularly, I don't know if it's.
All votes are final.
Inspiring is, no, I'm okay with, as a theme too, but just the examples, I'm not real inspired by those as thematic of a port city or, anyway, so it's just a comment. I'm sure you're going to refine these things, but maybe come back and come up with some other ideas. But, in terms of the idea, basic port.
Commissioners,
foundation.
by my count, I've got 3 votes for alternative 4A and 3 votes for alternative number 2. I think it would be perfectly acceptable.
No, it's 4 to, it's 4 to 2.
Yeah, I'm
Somebody
okay with
changed their
switching,
vote. He changed in the
I
final
see.
voting
I'm
bracket.
switching.
All right.
March
Under
Madness over
pressure,
here, he
yeah.
changed his mind.
I appreciate the
more of the
clarification.
practicality and the fact you can put West Sac on it, so.
I think I don't want to speak for everybody because we do have our opportunity here, but it sounds, we're interested in putting our city name. We're very proud of where we live and we like to show it off. I think starting with number 2, I can agree a little bit here with Mr. Peterson that dynamic aspects of any artistic ability are probably appreciated, maybe looking more a little bit into what the 4A, put in a little bit more, I guess, artistic style into the port version, but again, I think, at least on my part, and thinking about the public agency part of maintenance, the practicality and the budget side of life, that seems an appropriate recommendation for us. I will ask that we vote on sending option to the port, or at least showing that the record shows that we voted for the port. Any opposition to that recommendation? All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Appreciate it. Number 8, transportation meeting, January 7th. Reports from city staff. Jason?
Mr. Chair.
Before you do that, was that a unanimous
Oh, you sure?
for?
I definitely have opposition. Let me tell you a little story.
Right.
I was on the Arts Commission, and I was part of a 4-person group to choose the art that's in Joey Lopes Park. And that was the worst of the 3, in my opinion, the one that's currently up in the park. And every time I go by that park, there's not that many people looking at that piece of art. There's nobody looking at that piece of art most of the time. But I go by it and I say, ugh, that's the ugliest one. It's so boring. So I just think about that when I think about, although there is less of a budget involved to do a simpler crossing there, that's something that vehicles, mostly it's going to be vehicles looking at that thing, and the difference between something that's just kind of has an aesthetic appeal like the Weave does versus, and I would love there to be blue lighting on it. That would be pretty at night. But just generally during the day, cars driving by, so many more people will be wowed by that, by that. So that, I was just wasting time, I'm sorry about that, but if that was a vote just on
So that was.
which one I'd like.
That was a vote for port.
It was a vote for port, so I would.
Yeah, and
5 or 4?
it's
Voted
unanimous.
to
'cause
forward
we
the
voted
port
as a
option.
group.
I don't know
Yeah.
that we are asking
No.
for, you can correct me, I don't want to mess this up, but it was a recommendation to forward by the commission the port option.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So we can do a yes, no, if that what
No,
you're
that was
seeking.
a Democratic vote, and the port won, and that's fine, and I'm good with that.
Just
Okay,
for the
so
record,
thanks for
then
letting me tell my
it's
story, though.
Unanimous, then.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
for the record, I would like to have Ms. Schmidt just read off the vote, just have, do a roll call on that.
Sure.
Okay.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Kazanis?
4A, the waive.
Okay. Commissioner Peterson?
Yes, for option 2.
Okay. Commissioner Wetzel?
The port.
Commissioner Johnson?
The port?
And Commissioner Hawkinson?
4A, yeah.
Okay, so that's no. And
The port.
Vice Chair Ralston, the port. So it's 5 for the port and 1 for 4A.
4 to 2.
4 to 2.
Oh, you,
2 for the weave.
The weave, yeah.
He's a no on
So
the
no.
port.
oh, you were no on the port.
Yeah.
Okay.
4 to 2.
Okay. 4 to 2.
Appreciate your help. I don't mind going through making sure everybody's got what they want in there, so that it's an accurate reflection of our fun time here this evening. Reports from staff.
Yes, you had an item before you on the consent discussing the upcoming meetings for the 2019 calendar year. This was to represent the last meeting for this calendar year, but I am requesting that the commission consider an additional special meeting on December 3rd to hear an item on the pavement management system that would be going to the city council on the 5th. If this is acceptable to the commission, what I'd ask is if it can be decided this evening, that would be great. If not, if the commissioners could report individually to Ms. Schmidt to let them know what their schedule is and whether or not they would be able to attend a meeting. It's important that we have a quorum.
I am available.
I can do it.
Yeah. Hold on. We're good.
We're at 4.
I have to check schedule.
Okay. Thank you very much, commissioners. It appears that we would have a quorum.
Yeah, I'm good. I assume you're going to send an email and see if everybody
Right.
else can make it all that, yeah.
And that concludes any reports from staff.
Any future agenda item requests for December 3rd to be added on? There being no more comments or questions or concerns, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I will second. Have a great evening.